Auteur is a word you would use to describe a director who has a distinct and unique style of directing. Auteur theory was first brought up in a French magazine in which it stated that there is more to a movie than just a production label slapped onto it. It stated that each movie is unique to its director and has unique items in it that describe that director's directing. These things can be techniques that director uses to produce the movies, which can be the camera angle that director uses or the plot structuring techniques that he likes to use. In this video, I'll be talking about Christopher Nolan, who I believe is an auteur because of his movies such as The Prestige, Inception, and The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan is an auteur because of his techniques such as using dark shades of color in his movies, as well as using nice close-up shots whenever he's showing a conversation, and other techniques such as those, which are reusing actors from his previous movies that play similar roles, as well as using misdirection, which he creates by presenting a lack of information. Christopher Nolan also likes to use this idea of death of a loved one to the protagonist, or you can say a loss to the protagonist, to drive his plot. As for his movies, The Prestige is about two magicians trying to outdo each other, and Inception is about a group of people called extractors who are trying to implant an idea into a person's head. And for The Dark Knight Rises, it's really just Batman trying to save Gotham again. Christopher Nolan often likes to start off his movie by a death of a loved one to the protagonist, which then he uses to derive the plot. So he likes to use this idea of losing someone close or losing someone important to make his protagonist move on and seek to become this better person as we will know him. An example of this would be Batman. He loses his parents right in the beginning, so that's what it derives him to become Batman, the crime fighter as we know him. As far as camera angles are concerned, Christopher often likes to use close-up shots whenever he's making two characters have a conversation, and occasionally likes to use wide shots that give a good view of the terrain. As far as costumes are concerned, Christopher really likes to portray his male characters as gentlemen, so he dresses them up in suits, and for his female characters, he often dresses them up in gowns or dresses to make them look attractive.
Born in hell, forged from suffering, hardened by pain.
Christopher Nolan likes to use this technique misdirection, in which he will simply reduce the amount of information he's giving to his audience.
Child of Ra's al Ghul may decline,
but he's not the child of Ra's al Ghul.
And then later on, use that to his advantage and turn and twist the plot to his will, which will result in a lot of plot twists, and quite often his movies often end up going in a loop, so there is no ending to his movies. They often just loop back around to its beginning. And this creates a very vague ending, which helps the audience to forge their own opinion towards the ending, and often leaves them guessing if it really was the ending at all. Christopher Nolan movies are often made up of four main characters. There's the protagonist, who has suffered from a loss, and then there's the wise old advisor, who's often portrayed as Michael Caine.
I'd set you up with a chimpanzee if it brought you back to the world.
Who always advises the main character, the protagonist, to come back to the ordinary life and live a good life. And then there's the friend, the close friend, who always advises the protagonist to be reasonable and simply advises him as a good friend. And then there's the antagonist, who was a good person to begin with, but through unfair life and unfair lifestyle, he's been turned into this antagonist person who's simply seeking revenge in society. So Christopher Nolan likes to use dark shades to show his background, as well as using misdirection to direct his plot, and using costumes to describe his actors/characters, and using this death of a loved one to the protagonist to derive his plot. And these techniques are an evidence that show that Christopher Nolan is an auteur and his movies are unique to him.